Hello, and thanks for stopping by. As you may be able to garner from this breathtaking panorama, I'm currently in Scotland, which really is one of my most favourite parts of the world. The view seen here is from the summit of Connick Hill, which is situated beside Balmaha, a little village tucked away on the eastern shore of Loch Lomond. Despite being in the midst of such a vast landscape, Loch Lomond itself lies relatively close to a major city, that being Glasgow, which is only 20 miles or so from here. If you've been following my channel for a while, you may recall that I've made several videos set in Glasgow before, namely a 3-part series which focused on the history of the Glasgow Subway, one of the world's oldest underground systems. I'll leave links to those below in case you missed them. As for today though, I'd like to show you around another historic Glasgow institution, the Hunterian Museum, which, having first opened way back in 1807, holds the accolade of being Scotland's oldest public museum. And as we'll soon see, it's a place that's brimming with a stunning and truly eclectic mixture of objects. The Hunterian Museum takes its name from the man who founded it, Dr. William Hunter, who was born in East Kilbride in 1718. After studying divinity at Glasgow University, William decided to switch to medicine, and moved to London where he underwent training at St George's Hospital, which in those days was located on Hyde Park Corner. It's now based in Tooting. William soon rose to become one of the most respected and sought after physicians of his day. Queen Charlotte was amongst his patients, and as such, he ended up doing very well financially. This enabled William to indulge in his love of collecting, and over the years, he amassed a huge collection of objects, covering everything from zoology and medical curiosities, to coins, medals, minerals, and noted works of art. Keen for others to expand their own knowledge through his collection, William displayed this huge array of items in a private museum at number 16 Great Windmill Street in Soho, alongside an anatomy school where dissections were carried out before groups of eager medical students. In 1765, William declared he had a great inclination to do something considerable at Glasgow, and true to his word, when he passed away in 1783, his will bequeathed his entire collection to Glasgow University, along with a sum of money to create a museum in which to house it. The Hunterian Museum can be a little tricky to find at first. It's hidden away inside Glasgow University's main building, a magnificent piece of architecture which really is worth a look before we head in. The university building as it appears today dates from 1891, although Glasgow University itself is far older than that, having been founded in 1451. And the Hunterian Museum, which as mentioned earlier was established in 1807, was based at several other sites before finally moving here in the late 19th century. The university as it now stands was designed by the renowned architect Sir George Gilbert Scott, who was also famous for designing the Grand Midland Hotel, which defines London's St Pancras station. Sadly, George died before the Glasgow University building was complete, leaving his son, John Aldridge Scott, who was particularly adept at churches and cathedrals, to take over the project. Upon entering the Hunterian, one of the first objects you encounter is related to the history of the university itself. This is the Blackstone chair, a rather intimidating piece of furniture which, in a manner similar to the quiz show Mastermind, was once used to verbally examine students. The chair dates from 1775, and this method of testing remained in use until the mid-19th century. It's well known that Hadrian's Wall, which stretches for 73 miles across the top of northern England, was built by the Romans to mark the northernmost border of their empire. Somewhat less known though, is that the Romans did make an attempt to push their territory even further into what's now Scotland, or as they knew it, Caledonia, some 20 years after Hadrian's Wall was complete. This bold advance began in around 140 AD, during the reign of the Emperor Antonius Pius, with troops managing to forge their way 110 miles north of Hadrian's Wall. A new wall, known as the Antonine Wall, was then built, which ran for 39 miles between the Firth of Clyde and the Firth of Forth. This venture would prove to be relatively short-lived, however, with the Romans retreating back to Hadrian's Wall in the late 160s. Although this foray into Caledonia lasted barely 20 years, it did enable the Romans to leave their mark on the land, and the Hunterian Museum has a fascinating collection of artefacts related to this period, all of which have been excavated in Scotland. It's known that at least 17 military forts were constructed in Caledonia, and this object was once located inside one of them. As ornate as it is, this item had a very practical purpose. It was a drain cover used in the floor of the bathhouse's frigidarium, or cold room, the chamber where soldiers would have plunged into a cold pool of water after enduring the heat of the previous steam room. The fort from which this drain cover was found was located close to Motherwell, at a former mining village called Bothwellhaugh, which sadly no longer exists either, having been swept away in the 1960s. Bathhouses were an important aspect of Roman culture, and a number of other items related to them can be seen inside the museum. This is a particular favourite of mine, a board game complete with counters, which would have been used by bathers as they enjoyed their leisure time. The board and counters were discovered at another fort, located in what's now Bearsden, just north of Glasgow. This object, meanwhile, is a comb, for lice. Whilst this long metal stick is classed as a surgical probe, I dread to think where it would have been inserted. When Roman troops weren't bathing, they would have likely been out marching or on manoeuvres, and some fascinating items related to the military can be seen here. This, for instance, is a ballista ball, which in around 140 AD was launched from a Roman catapult in Caledonia. It's been speculated that, when fired, this ball was scalding hot, the intention of course being to set fire to whatever it smashed into. However, it would appear the folk on the receiving end were quick to deal with the burning hot missile, for it seems they plunged cold water all over it before it could do any damage, hence the cracks. If you were battling the Romans, it wasn't only flaming ballista balls you had to contend with. This is a ballista bolt, which was designed to be fired from a crossbow. Whilst this bulbous object once formed a shield boss, which if you found yourself in close combat, may well have been smashed into your face. Remarkably, this very well preserved piece of leather found in East Dunbartonshire was once part of a Roman army tent, and it would have been tethered by these wooden pegs. Equally well preserved, and from the same site, are these Roman shoes, representing examples for men, women and children. Along with a passion for bathing and their highly organised military, the Romans were very well known for their love of feasting. This beaker is a hunt cup. It depicts a dog chasing a hare. Hunting dogs from Britannia were highly prized across the empire, and the practice of hunting was a popular pastime amongst Roman soldiers. The booze drunk from this hunting cup may well have been poured from this barrel, which is remarkably well preserved for a wooden item. It was discovered at the remains of a fort in Kirkintilloch, and the name inscribed upon it suggests it once belonged to a fellow named Generius. Sticking with alcohol, this carved figure was found at the same fort. It represents Silenus, who in Roman mythology was Bacchus's drinking buddy, Bacchus being the god of wine. In Roman lore, Silenus was a popular comic figure, similar in a way to Shakespeare's Falstaff, basically an elderly bumbling man who was always drunk. Even more ornate than the hunting cup is this rare bronze jug, which was found just south of Glasgow. Decorated with the image of a woman holding a bird, it's believed this item was crafted in Italy during the late 1st or early 2nd century, and later brought to Caledonia by a high-ranking official, who in turn would have presented it to an equally high-ranked local. Speaking of officialdom, this tiny item is a sill box. During Roman times, documents were often sealed with wax and stamped with a personal mark, similar in a way to a signature, the stamp being made with a box such as this. It's believed this sealed box was made by a local craftsman in Caledonia. Less official, but equally intriguing, is this red tile, which is most likely intended for a roof or underfloor heating system. But as you can see, this example contains a paw print, most likely made by a naughty dog, as it scampered across the wet clay. One of the Hunterian's most eye-catching items is this Egyptian mummy, known as the Lady Shepenhor, a woman who died in around 600 BC, so some 2,600 years ago. The Lady Shepenhor was laid to rest at the necropolis of Thebes in southern Egypt, her sarcophagus being fashioned from sycamore wood, which, as seen here, is decorated with an incredible display of hieroglyphics. When laid to rest, she would have also been surrounded by jars containing myrrh and frankincense, along with other oils and perfumes. However, in a somewhat eerie twist, historians can't be 100% sure that the bandaged figure inside is the figure alluded to in the hieroglyphics. Because although the mummy is known to be female, the sarcophagus itself had already been prized open when it was acquired by the museum in the 1820s, and prior to that, its past had been poorly documented. More Egyptian history can be seen in this fine collection of gold coins, which, having been issued during the reign of the Ptolemies, date from the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC. The most outstanding coin, though, is this one, which depicts a profile of the last Egyptian pharaoh, Cleopatra. Looking at it here, it's easy to see why this is considered to be the world's best known example of a Cleopatra coin. One of the most mysterious displays inside the Hunterian is this collection of stone balls. They were discovered in Scotland and date from the Neolithic period, making them over 4,000 years old. As you can see, they are carved in a variety of curious, knobbly designs, although what exactly they were created for is unknown. What do you reckon their purpose was? Please be sure to share your theories in the comments. Alongside artefacts related to ancient civilizations, the Hunterian is also crammed with objects related to natural history. The centre of the main gallery, for example, is dominated by two large skeletons. This one is of a plesiosaur, a large marine reptile which lurked in the oceans some 160 million years ago. It was excavated near Peterborough in the early 20th century. The other skeleton is much more recent, and is of a false killer whale, so called because its skull is very similar to an orca. It's a shame they couldn't have thought of something more imaginative really, isn't it? Sadly, this particular false killer whale died in the Dornoch Firth after becoming stranded there in 1927. Returning to dinosaurs, there are many fossils to discover within the collection, some of which, rather creepily, have been carved out to make them truly three-dimensional. This vicious skull, discovered somewhere in Asia, once belonged to a Velociraptor, which, if you've seen Jurassic Park, is a dinosaur you know not to mess with. Whilst this leg, unearthed in North America, belonged to a Diplodocus, a gentle beast which weighed in at around 10 tons. On the opposite end of that scale is this tiny dinosaur footprint, which in 2006 was recognised by the Guinness Book of Records as being the smallest dino footprint ever discovered. It was found on the Isle of Skye, and belonged to a little dinosaur that would have been no bigger than a blackbird. It's been speculated that the dinosaurs were wiped out around 65 million years ago when a mighty asteroid struck the Earth. It would have certainly been bigger than this little rock, but that doesn't make this object any less impressive, for it's a meteorite, which landed in Hyde Postle, just north of Glasgow, early on the morning of April the 5th, 1804. And as it tore through the atmosphere, a series of loud bangs were heard between Glasgow and Falkirk. This meteorite originated in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, making it around 4,500 million years old. Pretty mind-boggling, eh? This was the first meteorite to be ever found in Scotland, although having said that, only 3 others have been found in the 220 years since this one crashed to Earth. It is a rare event after all. If you don't like creepy crawlies, it may be best to look away for a few moments, as the Hunterian has some huge specimens on show. This, for example, is a Hercules beetle, which is native to South America and can grow up to 5 inches long. Whilst this is a harlequin beetle, noted for its extended claws, which as you can probably guess, help it to put up a good fight. William Hunter was especially fond of insects. During his lifetime, he amassed over 7,600 specimens, which he displayed in custom-built cabinets. This is one of them, which was made in London and displayed in his private museum on Great Windmill Street. I'm sure it was quite the party piece. Considering William Hunter was a renowned physician, it's not surprising that the Hunterian has built a substantial collection of artefacts related to medical history, some of which will make you feel very glad to be alive now, rather than in decades past. One of the first such objects you see upon entering the museum is this ear trumpet, which is made by J. Gardner & Son of Edinburgh. When I first saw the ear trumpet, I imagined it to be a lot older, so I was somewhat surprised to discover that it dates from the early 20th century. Quite remarkable really, when you consider how hearing devices have developed since then. Upstairs meanwhile is this rather unsettling looking doll, which was used in conjunction with a set of forceps when training obstetric students. It appears to date from the late 19th century and was used by Glasgow Royal Maternity Hospital. These wooden hands were crafted by Yarrow & Co. in World War I for men recuperating at the Erskine Hospital, their purpose of course being to provide replacements for hands that had been blown off in the hell of the trenches. Yarrow were in fact shipbuilders, although as these hands show, factories turned their skills to help in the war effort in other ways. The creation of false limbs was something of a mass industry in the aftermath of the Great War. This machine, a Wimshurst electrostatic generator, dates from 1895. Built in Glasgow, it was used to create high voltage static electricity for use in early X-rays. Another interesting contraption is this item. It's a prototype ultrasound scanner, which was constructed by a group of medics at Glasgow University in the 1950s. The team behind it truly revolutionised scanning with this device, even though they had to cobble it together using an old hospital bed and various bits of Meccano. Speaking of hospital beds, how would you like to have been treated on this one? This bed was used by Sir William McEwen, a renowned doctor who was born on the Isle of Bute in 1848, and who went on to pioneer modern brain surgery. Indeed, McEwen is regarded to be the father of neurosurgery. Although personally, I wouldn't fancy having my brain poked about on his hard-looking table if I'm honest. These items also belong to Dr. McEwen. They're his personal surgical instruments, used for carrying out amputations. He designed them himself. Another doctor who revolutionised medicine was Dr. Joseph Lister, who pioneered the use of antiseptic surgery, a life-saving concept to which we take for granted today. When starting his career, Joseph was inspired by the work of William Hunter's younger brother, John Hunter, who also happened to be an avid collector. His collection forms the basis of the Hunterian Museum in London, although that's a video for another time. In the Glasgow Hunterian, a number of Joseph Lister's tools are on display. These are his amputation saws and knives, which dates from the mid-19th century. And he used this large copper vat for sterilising ligatures. Early on, when developing his antiseptic devices, Joseph used this contraption, a carbolic steam spray, which used to squirt carbolic acid both into the air and into the patient's wounds. Those being treated would have lain on a table like this one. This is a model of Joseph Lister's, which he used when working at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary in the 1860s. Finally, there's no polite way of putting this, but this flask contains a sample of Joseph Lister's urine. Yep, you heard that right. He peed this out in 1868 as a means of demonstrating that, as long as air was excluded, his urine would remain sterile. And here it is today, 155 years later. I wouldn't fancy curating it though. Imagine if you were unlucky enough to drop the flask. Anyway, on that note, I should say that what I've shown you here represents only a fraction of the Hunterian's collection. It even has 2 more museums on the campus, those being a zoology museum and a major gallery, which I simply haven't got the time to show you here. So if you happen to be in Glasgow, why not pop by yourself for a more in-depth look? Entry is free, and you won't be disappointed. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look around Glasgow's Hunterian Museum and would love to hear your thoughts. Have you visited it before? If so, what was your favourite object? Please do be sure to let me know in the comments. Thank you so much to all of you who support my channel with your kind words, likes and shares. I couldn't do this without you. If you haven't yet subscribed to Rob's London, then I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, will ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish a new video. Plus of course it would be wonderful to have you along. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support my work with a tip via either my Ko-fi account, which I'll link below, or the YouTube thanks button, which appears as a heart icon beneath the video. Any such financial donations are of course greatly appreciated, and they really do help go towards creating content. Anyway, on that note, thanks again for watching friends. Stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.